All right. Well, while they're working on that, it's okay because I was going to give us a summary to start off with. If you were here for the last Torah talk, we were looking at eschatology. We were looking at end times, and we focused in on just talking about what the main general views are within the greater church body as a whole. We looked at premillennialism. We looked at amillennialism. Looked at postmillennialism and even the preterist view, just so we can kind of have an understanding of what those are. If you weren't here for that, or if you're watching online and you hadn't seen that one, go back and watch that first one. We spent a little while going through all of those, looking at the various types, even looking at like historical premillennialism versus dispensational premillennialism, just so we can understand where various people are coming at, why they think what they think as it involves their theology, the method that they get to those various viewpoints. So today we're going to focus in on what does the Bible actually give us? What's the sheep pen? What's the actual land use that the Bible allows for us to understand our own eschatology and the room it gives us to go one way or another with it? That's kind of what we're going to look at today. At the end, I will tell you a little bit more about how I understand it, but before we get there, I just want to establish what the Bible does allow us to do one way or another. And then I'll give you some of my opinions and views. Let's see. I know they're working on that back there. When you do get it, if you can get it to 32, go ahead. Until then, I will just tell you this. So we're going to start by looking at what we can know for sure. All right. One of the first things we can know is that, and this is the easy one, is, thank you, that works. Here, I'll go ahead and skip us ahead here. One more. Yeah, what we can know for sure. So the first thing that we can know for sure as it involves what the Bible allows in our understanding of end times is a very obvious and easy one, all right? The restoration of Israel in the world, right? At the end of it all, it's the restoration of Israel in the world. God bring restoration. That one's easy, right? Obviously, we looked at tons of things. If you've been here for any amount of time, you've heard it from me, from Pastor. I'm going to show you just a couple passages. We won't go too hard into this. When we did a look at the New Covenant, which was Jeremiah chapters 30 through 33, I made a point when we were doing that of showing how even in the giving of the New Covenant, there's a reference by God that all this, in reference to the New Covenant, comes to its fullness during the Akaret Yahamim, which is the Hebrew for the end, all right? This is at the end. And that's, God gives that as he's giving the New Covenant, all right? The famous part people think of the New Covenant in Jeremiah 31 is, I'll make a new covenant with the house of Israel, the house of Judah. That is a part of a larger piece of prophecy that sits at Jeremiah chapter 30 through 33. Anyway, God in reference to that talks about, the storm of Adonai that's coming, the storm of Adonai, this idea of the day of the Lord, bursting with fury. God's fierce anger will not abate until he accomplishes the purposes of his heart. In the end, in the Akaret Yahamim, in the last days, in the end of days, you will understand when that time comes, says Adonai, I will be the God of all the clans of Israel, and they will be my people. Again, the restoration of Israel, right? In Hebrews chapter 2, funny enough, a lot of people, when they want to talk about what Hebrews is talking about, don't realize that Hebrews, the author of Hebrews, makes it a point in chapter 2 to say that everything he's talking about, what he's going to get into, he's talking about the world to come, all right? And the CJB will say the Olam Haba. In most of your English translations, it's going to say something like concerning the world to come, all right? That's the other verse there. It's just another, the NASB is on the bottom. And so further on in Hebrews, it's admitted that even now, today, there is a sense in which everything is under Yeshua's authority, but not really, not fully. And Hebrews even tells us that because in the world to come, everything will be under Yeshua's authority. But right now, we're not there. In Hebrews 2, it also says this in reference to God, that you crowned him, Yeshua, with glory and honor. You, the Father, put everything in subjugation under his feet being Yeshua. So it says, in subjecting everything to him, he left nothing unsubjected to him. However, at present, we do not see everything subjected to him. Okay, in the age that we are in now, until we get to the end times and then that 1,000-year reign that we had looked at a lot last time we were together, that's when everything is finally subjected to Yeshua. Everything is under his feet. Yes, he is ruler, but presently not everything's under his control in that sense, okay? Obviously God is in control, but the idea is that there is competing powers. As long as there's competing powers, there's a war. All right, that's what's happening now in our current age. All right. Ultimately, the whole idea of that the land of all Israel, for all the tribes of Israel, right? The complete destruction of Israel's enemies, and all these things are ultimately, as a part of the new covenant, are fulfilled within the end of days. Okay. So, looking at that, that's again one of these things we can know for sure. I want to show you a couple more verses here. This is Ezekiel 39. We're going to read a long passage from that. Ezekiel 39. I'm starting at 21, verse 21. All right. This is a part of a prophecy that starts in chapter 38, right? In some reference to the end days. But here at the very end of it, God says this: "Thus, as a result of everything he does when he comes to destroying the nations of Mag and Magog, the Satan's empire and all that stuff, this is the end result of that. Thus I will display my glory among the nations, so that all the nations will see my judgment when I execute it, and my hand when I lay it on them. From that day on, the house of Israel will know that I am Adonai their God, while the Goyim, the nations, the Gentiles, will know that the house of Israel went into exile because of their guilt, because they broke faith with me, so that I hid my face from them and handed them over to their adversaries, and they fell by the sword, all of them. Yes, I treated them as their uncleanliness and crimes deserved, and I hid my face from them. Therefore, Adonai Elohim says, now I will restore the fortunes of Yaakov, and I have compassion on the entire house of Israel, and I will be jealous for my holy name." Something we looked at a few times before is that God, even his long-suffering patience with Israel, a lot of it is because he made a promise on his own name that he's going to save them. So it's for his own name's sake that he will do these things. It's a guarantee. Because again, if only for his name's sake he will do it. They will bear their shame and all their guilt from breaking faith with me once they are living securely in their land, with no one to make them afraid. This is reminiscent of Zechariah 12 through 14, the idea that they will look on him whom they pierced. They will feel the shame once they realize it's been him this whole time. So yeah, once they're back in the land, and that's at the end when he's bringing all 100% of everybody back into the land of his people, there's an aspect of shame that some of them will have, those who survive into the millennium. So it continues here saying that this will be after I have brought them back from the peoples and gathered them out of their enemies' lands, thereby being consecrated through them in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am Adonai their God, since it was I who caused them to go into exile among the nations, and it was I who regathered them to their own land. I will leave none of them there anymore, and I will no longer hide my face from them, for I have poured out my spirit on the house of Israel, says Adonai Elohim. That's that ending portion of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And this is essentially leading into the 1,000 years. At the end of the 1,000 years, when we have the whole tribulation period and everything, and Yeshua comes to save Israel at the very end, this is what's being established. This is Zechariah 12 through 14. This is Yeshua starting the kingdom, and he's going to literally bring every physical Israelite who is still alive at that time to the land. And this will be the restart and the restoration of the kingdom in full. But that's at the end of the tribulation, leading into the 1,000 years. Not after the 1,000 years, not during the 1,000 years. This is what leads to it. So, again, restoration of the world, the restoration of Israel, pretty simple. What, again, can we know for sure? The 7 years, or the general 7-year time frame that a lot of people tend to think about when they read end-time books or, people's commentary. Where do we kind of get that from? I'm not going to go into all math of it and whatnot, but the general gist of it comes heavily from Daniel chapter 9, all right, as well as some parts of Revelation that we're going to look at. It's there in Daniel chapter 9, and we'll look at that we get this concept of 70 weeks of years, and then there's a final week of 7 years that Daniel deals with. The idea is that there was a time where Messiah had to come within a certain amount of years, which he did. Yeshua came a certain amount of years after the temple was rebuilt. But there's this last week of years that is kind of left open-ended in Daniel's prophecy. And this is where we kind of start to build an understanding of the 7 years, the last years in which the Antichrist himself comes. In Revelation, it also, in reference to this time, talks about that last half of the 7 years. It's usually known as the Jacob's troubles. It's the portion of the 7 years where things get really, 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 really bad. All right. In Revelation, it talks about the 42 months, 3.5 years. It talks about the 1,260 days, 3.5 years. Both Daniel and Revelation make reference to a time, times, and half a time. That's a year, 2 years, and then a half a year. That's 3.5 years. In Daniel 9, the portion in question where the people gather this from, and from ancient times to now, is this. Then after 62 weeks, Mashiach will be cut off and have nothing. All right, this is part of a larger prophecy. But this little portion here is the key. The people of a prince yet to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, but his end will come with the flood. The desolations are decreed until the war is over. He will make a strong covenant with leaders for 1 week of years. That's 7. For a half of the week he will put a stop to the sacrifice and the grain offering, and on the wing of detestable things the desolator will come and continue until the already decreed destruction is poured out on the desolator. It's a reference to that abomination that causes desolation mentioned earlier on in Daniel, and then again after this, a few chapters later, mentioned a couple times. It's the one that Yeshua makes reference to in Matthew 24. In Daniel chapter 7, just to show that little bit, this is in the context of after he's had the dream of the 4 different beasts, each representing a different empire. You have the Babylonian Empire, you have the Mede-Persian Empire, you have the Greek Empire, you have what some would argue is the Roman Empire. I argue it is not, so we'll get to that a little bit later. I believe there's a different and better option that the Bible provides for us on that. Either way, finally there's a 4th and final beast that is kind of like a global empire or has global influence. Ultimately, it is the Antichrist kingdom that's supposed to come in the end. When he's having the vision explained to him, one of the angels is telling him about it. It tells him this. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom, that's that final beast kingdom, out of this kingdom, 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them. Now, he will be different from the earlier ones, and he will put down 3 kings. He will speak words against the Most High and try to exhaust the holy ones of the Most High. That is Israel and then the believers in general, in the greater portion. He will attempt to alter seasons in the law and the holy ones, and they, the holy ones, will be handed over to him for a time, a times, and a half a time. Jacob's troubles, as it's said in other parts of Scripture. Yeshua makes reference to this. This is huge because as it involves the preterist, as it involves those who have a view that these things have already been completed and done away with, it's already been fulfilled, those kind of mentalities when it comes to end times, Yeshua, in referencing the time that's supposed to happen before his return, utilizes this prophecy, taking it and putting it into the future. There's a lot of people who think that the prophecy of the abomination that causes desolation in the temple was fulfilled with Antiochus Epiphanes, all right? And in fairness, that is a big type. That's part of those patterns. There's a fulfillment aspect there. But that fulfillment isn't the exhaustion of the prophecy because there is, again, a temple that will be defiled and a man who will sit there claiming to be God, the man of lawlessness. We're going to look at some passages about that. But that's what this is in reference to in Daniel. Yeshua utilizes that and points it forward again and says to the people when they're asking him about it, about the end. So when you see the abomination that causes devastation spoken through the prophet of Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand the allusion. That will be a time for those in Yehuda to escape to the hills. If someone is on the roof, he must not go down to gather his belongings from his house. If someone's in the field, he must not turn back to get his coat. In other words, when this happens, it's hitting the fan immediately. Go. There's not, you don't have time. When this starts to happen, if you're over there, this is specifically for them there in Israel. When this happens, sometime here in the future, where it's a tabernacle or a brick and mortar temple, one of the two, and the Antichrist goes in there and then claims to be that, get out of Dodge. Because when he does that, he's not doing that alone. He's doing that with a plan in place and ready, and all hell is going to break loose. There will be massive persecution. And as it involves the Jews, it won't be a matter of whether they believe in Yeshua or not. Just like the Holocaust, it's going to be like that in the land. Yeshua continues saying, what a terrible time it will be for the pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that you will not have to escape in winter or on Shabbat, for there will be trouble, then worse than there has ever been from the beginning of the world until now, and there will be nothing like it again. This is another one of those things. This has not happened yet. You can't look at this and say it's happened. We live in a world where we have the hindsight of World War I and World War II, let alone things like the Holocaust. We have seen true global conflict like they never saw it back then. What's going to happen will not have something to match it. So it hasn't happened yet because we have far exceeded what has ever happened in this world before as it involves global war and things like that. So Yeshua, talking about this, puts this again to the future and says about this time of trouble that's going to come during that time. And then ultimately, Revelations 12, in talking about this whole prophecy right here is in reference to the dragon who's trying to get the woman with the 12 stars on her head. The Catholic Church will say it's Mary, it's Israel that is being spoken of. The imagery is very much about Israel, the 12, the idea of the 12 tribes and all that stuff. The baby that's born to this woman being Yeshua. That's why they tend to take that and try to say it's about Mary, but again, it's not. When this happens, this moment, it says that when the dragon saw that he had been hurled down to earth, he went in pursuit of the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she could fly to her place in the desert where she is taken care of for a season, 2 seasons, and a half a season is how this particular English translation puts it, away from the serpent's presence. Again, that's an allusion back to Daniel, a time, a times, and a half a time. There is a time where Israel, those who listened and heard the warning, so presumably mostly Messianics and those who were listening to them, when this time comes in the end, that great tribulation, most of those who are going to escape from the physical portion over there in Israel, it's going to be because of the Messianic Jews over there who know of these things and have been warning about it, because when they see it, they're going. And people are going to go with them, believers or not. Those who escape, they're going to get out into the desert. They're going to have a time of a place where they're being kept supernaturally safe, it seems, during that time, while the rest are, going through hell. That said, continuing that part, the serpent spewed water like a river out of its mouth after the woman in order to sweep her away in the flood. But the land came to her rescue. There's a lot of areas in prophecy, Ezekiel, Isaiah, and whatnot, where this idea of a flood coming over to punish Israel is in reference to armies, is in reference to things like that. It's the same imagery that is being used here, this flood that comes after, in order to sweep her away in the flood. But the land came to her rescue. It opened its mouth and swallowed up the river, which the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. The dragon was infuriated over the woman and went off, wow, this is a big part right here, and went off to fight the rest of her children, those who obey God's commandments and bear the witness to Yeshua. Which is to say, believers in general, Jew or Gentile. Once he tries to go after Israel, and there's a portion of them that is supernaturally kept safe, it doesn't seem to happen for the rest of the world or the rest of the believers, that supernatural aspect. He's going to come and go. And then you see that in Revelation. You get those, it says, who go to the sword, who are beheaded, and all the other stuff that happens in the several chapters. This is also why, we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but I do not hold to a pre-trib rapture. If everybody's taken out before the tribulation, then who's being persecuted? It's not just Jewish people. It's no. This is the time of perseverance. That's why God talks so much about perseverance. To persevere through times of persecution and struggle. The one thing that Yeshua guaranteed that all people who follow him would have. He says, I promise you, you will have persecution in your time and in your days. And then, we got these theologies that say, no, we'll never have to go through that. Stop it. You're killing yourself. I find it interesting. I just want to show this. This is also in that New Covenant portion in Jeremiah 31, beginning of the chapter. This is right after that area where it says, in those last days they will understand. The previous chapter right before where God makes reference to the end days. He says this, here's what Adonai says, the people escaping the sword found favor in the desert, for I have brought Israel to its rest. It continues on saying that from a distance Adonai appeared to me. I love you with an everlasting love, and so on and so forth. It's really just that kind of first verse there, the verse 2 I wanted us to look at, because I think there might be a little something there. This is right after he talks about how in the last days they will understand, and he says, my people, they're going to find favor in the desert. And where is it? It says in Revelation they're going to get out to, the desert, the place they're going to be kept safe. A little something I think is there. Maybe I'm reading into it. I'll let you guys decide. In any case, the 7 years and that general time frame of that. Ultimately, what can we also know for sure? We can actually know about the rapture. There are arguments amongst many in the body about a pre-trib rapture, a pre-wrath rapture, a post-trib rapture. I'm almost positive there's at least 2 more. The main one you've probably heard is the pre-tribulation rapture. Think Left Behind, right? Literally, the inspiration of Left Behind is this next passage, and we're going to look at that real quick. I don't know if you grew up on DC Talk or heard DC Talk back in the 90s. I used to listen to a lot of them. They got that one song, 2 men walking up a hill, one turned around, the other was left, one disappeared and one's left standing still. And then they say, I wish we've all been ready. That whole song. It's based off of this passage. Left Behind pulls a lot from this passage. but they also misunderstand this passage. All right, this is, again, the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24 to 25, Yeshua talking about the end. He spends 2 chapters talking about the end times. This is actually one of the longest things he talks about. He says this, "There will be 2 men in a field. One will be taken and the other left behind. There will be 2 women grinding flour at a mill. One will be taken, the other left behind. So stay alert, because you don't know what day your Lord will come." The funny thing is, this is also in Luke. Luke utilizes this as well, same Olivet Discourse, and gives it a little bit more context. Because they ask, where are the people taken to? And he says, the ones who are taken. Where are they taken to? They are taken to the winepress of God's fury. You, in this context, want to be left behind. This is not talking actually about the rapture at all, funny enough, and so many people use it for that. He's not even talking about the rapture. He's actually talking about the judgment. Right before he gets to this, he talks about Noah and how it'll be like the time of Noah. People won't know what's coming, and then it's taken. This is a warning, because when Yeshua comes, it's a bloodbath. Yeshua is the one doing the bloodbath. The winepress is the fury of God stomping, metaphorically speaking, on all those he's against, squishing them. All right? That's why it says that he will have blood on his robe when he comes into Israel, because he's already been slaughtering everybody else on his way in. In the context there, you want to be left behind. This doesn't mean that the rapture doesn't exist. It's just that this is literally not the passage for it. That's all. How can we know, if at all, when the rapture actually is? Looking at Revelation 20, I'm going to start here. We're going to start at the very end, because one of the biggest clues is here. In reference to the 1,000 years, this is that happens leading up into the 1,000 years, at the end of the tribulation, when Yeshua comes. They came to life and ruled with Messiah for 1,000 years. The rest of the dead, this is key, the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were over. This is the first resurrection. Contextually, again, this is at the end of the tribulation, going into the 1,000 years. You can say it's an event that happens over a month, a week, whatever, that's fine, but that's where it is, okay? This is the first resurrection. Again, first resurrection. We have a name for this. It's the first resurrection, the resurrection of the living and the dead, okay? This is the ones all those who believe in Yeshua are involved with. You get your new body. Thank God. You get your new body. All those who have lived up to this time, are living at the time when he comes, or are already dead, you get your new body. This is the first resurrection. I'm just going to ad nauseum say that one more time. This is the first resurrection. All right. So, they will rule with him for 1,000 years, right? Paul and Thessalonians, both his letters of Thessalonians are heavy with eschatology. It's funny, Paul was only there for 2-3 weeks. John, do you remember? I think it says he was in Thessalonica for 2 or 3 Shabbats, is what it says, literally 3 Shabbats, 2 or 3. So he was only there for a few weeks. And yet, in his letters, he tells them, we've talked about this. I was there. I spoke with you. What does that mean? Part of his gospel teaching was teaching eschatology. Sometimes some people will say, listen, that's just eschatology. Let's focus on the gospel. That is part of the gospel. Your understanding of end times is part of the gospel. Let's not overly separate things and compartmentalize. I can't speak. Compartmentalize. I can't even say it right now. Sorry. Don't try to separate things into different rooms. There's a word for that, and I can't speak right now. Anyway, Paul gave them all. He gave it to them all, because here's the thing. The gospel is the good news. The good news of what? The restoration and everything of the world. But all that is in the end. It's in the end. So of course he spoke to them about the end, about eschatology and all that stuff, because that's part and parcel with the gospel, to have a correct understanding of what the gospel is even giving you hope for. So in 1 Thessalonians, he says this, now brothers, we want you to know the truth about those who have died. Otherwise, you might become sad the way other people do when they have nothing to hope for. For since we believe that Yeshua died and rose again, we also believe that in the same way, God, through Yeshua, will take with him those who have died. When we say this, we base it on the Lord's own word. We who remain alive when the Lord comes will certainly not take precedence over those who have died. In other words, the dead rise first when he comes. The dead rise first when he comes, and then those who are still alive are taken after. There's an order of how this works according to the scripture. Right? It gives us that order for this end. He says, "For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a rousing crowd, with a call from one of the ruling angels, and with God's shofar, the trumpet blast. Those who died united with Messiah will be the first to rise. Then we who are still left alive will be caught up with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we will always be with the Lord." So encourage each other with these words. Again, the order is that when Yeshua comes down and that trumpet's blast on his way down, the dead come up first, and then those who are living. Why is that important? Why am I emphasizing that? Because according to Revelation, when do the dead rise? In that first resurrection. No, the first resurrection. You're right. But it tells us when the first resurrection is, at the coming of Yeshua, at the end of the tribulation, or that's what ends the tribulation, if you will, which is to say that all is the end. Whether that's in the span of a week and then some things are happening before you get to the 1,000 years, whatever. But it's at the end. It's the final climax. It's not a secret coming at the beginning of the tribulation, halfway in the tribulation. No. It's that. If you got questions, in a little bit, we'll get into them at the end, I promise. If you can wait that long. Let me know. If you got to leave and interrupt, I'll that's fine. That said, with that in mind, I want to show you this too, the 2 Thessalonians. All right, again, still Paul. "But in connection with the coming of our Lord Yeshua the Messiah and our gathering together to meet him, we ask you, brothers, not to be easily shaken in your thinking or anxious because of a spirit or a spoken message or a letter supposedly from us claiming that the day of the Lord has already come." This is really, really important. We already know from what he said in 1 Thessalonians that he connects the resurrection with the coming of Yeshua. So now, in reference to the coming of Yeshua, he's letting them know this hasn't happened yet, because there were some out there telling them that it has already happened. That's why they were being persecuted so bad, because persecution was really bad for a lot of these people back then. And they're thinking maybe the day of the Lord has already come. Maybe we're stuck with all this. He's like, no. The day of the Lord has not come yet. This is really key, because in spite of this is the deception that still goes around today. "Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for the day will not come until after the apostasy has come. And the man who separates himself," in this CJB it says, "separates himself from the Torah," and most of your English translations, they'll say the man of lawlessness, "has been revealed, the one destined for doom." This is Antichrist. It's a reference to Antichrist. "He will oppose himself to everything that the people call God or make an object of worship. He will put himself above them all, so that," guys, this is Daniel's desolation, that abomination that causes desolation right here, "so that he will sit in the temple of God and proclaim that he himself is God." So the coming of the day of the Lord, which Paul has already linked to the resurrection, and as we also see in Revelations, are linked to the resurrection, which is to say also the rapture. Those are one and the same. That itself doesn't even happen until, at a minimum, Antichrist has been revealed and has actually done the desolation in the temple, what Yeshua referred to in Matthew 24. We know that happens, give or take, around the halfway point. We'll get to that in a moment, the halfway point of the 7 years. In other words, again, a pre-tribulation rapture by just this order of events that the Bible gives us is literally not even biblically possible. It can't happen, because then it would be contradicting the Word of God. Again, with just this portion, at a minimum, you can say maybe it's after, and it's somewhere during those last 3.5 years. But there's more. Like I said, Revelation says it happens after the fact. So even then, we know that it's at the end of the tribulation. That said, just to give you a visual, it's the man of lawlessness is revealed. This leads into the tribulation, Jacob's troubles, the various names called of it, those last 3.5 years, that time and a half of times. After that order of events is the day of the Lord / resurrection / rapture, because those are all one and the same event. It's with the coming of Yeshua, which is the day of the Lord. All right. So we can know that in reference to the rapture. This is what the Bible gives us. That's the playroom it gives us on all those things so far. A general order of events on the bigger scale, not just rapture and stuff like that, but other things the Bible gives us. All right. Looking at Revelation, when the Lamb broke the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for what seemed like an hour. Then I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and they were given the 7 shofars, the 7 trumpets. Why did I put that there? In Revelation, more than any of the other parts of other end-time prophecies, Revelation gives us that kind of big view where we kind of can see the order of things, how they play out. It doesn't give us always every little detail, but it gives us enough. We know the seals literally are what bring about the trumpets. And then the trumpets are literally what brings about the 7 bowls of wrath. That's important because you got some people out there when they're trying to understand and figure this out, they will say that these are all happening at the same time. There's a lot of people who will say the seals and the trumpets and the bowls of wrath are actually all the same thing, just told to us in a different way. I could understand that as a potential, but here's the problem. The seventh seal is what brings about the seven trumpets. So there's, again, an order given to us. One thing actually leads to the next event according to the scripture itself. Little things like this, the fifth trumpet, we're told that one actually, there's a amount of time given to the fifth trumpet. There are some people out there who say, the trumpets and the bowls are all happening in the last 2 weeks or the last day. It's just all God's wrath coming on and whatnot. Well, at a minimum, the fifth trumpet, the events of it last for 5 months. So you can't really do that. There are not too many people out there that try to do that, but there are definitely some. I've heard it, even here, I've heard some who will say that, so it's a good point to remember. Not only do these give us a kind of order of events, that some of them have time to it. You got to, whatever theology you want to come up with it, you have to fit that into it. You have to. And then ultimately, again, the Antichrist himself will claim to be God in the temple. He will make it desolate. This is the halfway mark of the 7 years. And so some good questions to kind of ask is this during the various 7 seals and trumpets? Do we know where the 7 seals and trumpets are in relation to the abomination of the temple? I don't know that we can say that clearly without a shadow of a doubt. I think this is the area where we can get a little bit of wiggle room. When I get to a part where I'll tell you my opinions, I will elaborate on that. But at a minimum, you kind of have a little bit there, but there's not enough, I think, to really pin it down and say, well, this happens maybe after this trumpet or before that trumpet or after this seal. I don't think the Bible gives us enough to know for sure for that part. But we do have that general order of events, right? The general location of the events. A lot of people, when they think, if you ever were into the Left Behind series and whatnot, stuff was happening in Israel, but it was very focused on a lot of other areas of the world. Even the Antichrist was from other areas of the world, the UN and things like that. I'm not saying that won't play a part in end times, but when you read through Scripture, if there's anything that you see redundantly just shown throughout end time scriptures from all the prophets, it's hyper-focused in the Middle East. Hyper-focused in the Middle East. America is not mentioned. Russia is not mentioned. I'm not saying America won't play a part. I'm not saying Russia won't play a part. But they are not the main characters, if you will, on a corporate level. It's just not. And I'm going to add these two together because everything I'm about to show you, it's not a whole lot, kind of goes with this. The world will be against Israel. That's also very clear in end time scriptures. So both of these things. All right. I'm not going to go through every little scripture. You can look these up on your own, take a picture of it if you want. But this is just a few. Some of these we've already gone through ad nauseum in our congregation before. But Zechariah 12 through 14. Again, hyper-focused in the Middle East and also the world coming against Israel. You're going to see both of those there. Joel chapter 3. All right. Same thing. The world coming against Israel. Again, a hyper-focus on the Middle East. Ezekiel chapter 38 through 39 literally mentions names of the places that are a part of this final beast coalition. This end-time enemy that's coming. It gives us the names. It tells us. And guess what? They're all centered around the Middle East. All right? You got Egypt. You got what is today modern Turkey. You have the areas of Iraq, Iran, and so on and so forth. You got northern Africa. All of that. It mentions them by name. And it's not the only one to mention those same places by name when it comes to end-time scripture. In other words, again, the focus is really there. It really is. Psalms 83. Same thing, the whole world coming against Israel. The last few chapters of Daniel, you'll see it in there. Micah 4, Isaiah 34, Revelation as a whole, and so many more. So many more prophecies talk about this kind of stuff. It's hard to not think that the Middle East is not where these things are going to happen. I don't know how you can read the Bible and not see that. But yeah, real quick, I'm going to show you this map. With some of those I'll go this way. With some of those. Cool, they fixed it, so it doesn't matter. All right, anyway, so with some of those things in mind I was just saying, when we were looking at the map here, Israel right there in the center, Middle East focus again, and the surrounding areas. That's what we see throughout the Bible when it's talking about, even in Daniel's prophecies about the king of the north and the king of the south, a lot of which played itself out, not 100%. A lot of it played itself out with the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire, which was the king of the north, the king of the south, and all the stuff that would happen. That's where Antiochus Epiphanes comes from. All focused here. the prophecies, again, that we see just in Revelation about Israel going out, the fact that at the temple is where these things are going to happen, it's all focused here. All these groups that will come against it. And lo and behold, as we get closer to the end, what do we see today? I don't know how people don't see it sometimes. Most people do, at least they always see this, but some who don't, I don't get it. Today we have Israel back in the land, and quite literally all the places talked about in the Bible that are going to come against them just so happen to be, generally speaking, their geopolitical enemies. I don't know. I don't know how people can't see that, but it's all there. It's all there when you look at a map. I know some people sometimes when they're talking about end times, it's not to say that this won't be a global affair in general. I'm not saying that. But keep in mind, even in Daniel, when he talks about Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, he calls Nebuchadnezzar the king of the world, that his empire is the empire of the world. But quite literally, the Nebuchadnezzar Babylonian Empire was here. That's not even the whole Middle East, but he was the empire of the world. Because he was both talking to to physical Babylon, but he was also talking to somebody else. All right? Because this is the spiritual Babylon that we've got to think about as well. And Antichrist and all that kind of stuff. But the point is that, Persia, Cyrus, he's called the king and master of the world. I promise you, they didn't have ports in Antarctica. These guys weren't dealing with, the people of Mexico. It's not the world. Even when they said the world, then the focus was still here. You get what I'm saying? So that's what I'm kind of getting at. We see that in Scripture. It's not to say that the world won't be influenced. I'm not saying that. But again, the main players, that where the focus is over there. All right? All right, so some version of Babylon will exist. All right, this is what we see in Scripture. What do I mean by some version? You could try to make an argument that an actual literal physical Babylon is going to come back up in Iraq. You could probably make that argument biblically and kind of have something there. I don't think that's the case, but I think you can say the Bible might allow someone to go that way with it, so I do put it there. But either way, some version of Babylon, whether it's physical or more of a spiritual thing, okay? A spiritual entity of sorts, the world system in a sense. Chapter 17 through 18 of Revelation, those two chapters deal heavily with Mystery Babylon, as it's called, all right? Babylon the Great, the Mystery Babylon, the great whore who has the money, rides the beast, his fame, and gets drunk off the blood of the saints. This is, whoever this is, on a corporate level, is a massive persecutor of saints worldwide, it definitely would seem, and definitely not necessarily isolated to the Middle East. Although I do think, when we get to my opinions later, I do think that's where it's going to be. It's a place that seems to be a place of massive trade. They have money. The languages of the world are spoken there. And that kind of makes sense when you look at the types for this, which would be the original Babylon. Babylon was a major trade center. Of the known world around it, the languages of the world were there. It was a metropolitan kind of place, all right? There was a time where I used to kind of wonder, maybe the United States is that. Again, we'll get to that later, but I don't think that's the case anymore. But, there are people who think that because the United States has got all the languages of the world kind of spoken in it, it's a massive trade place, so on and so forth. So I can see the connections there. I do believe ultimately that we have types and shadows of her, Babylon, throughout history. I think there are many places that fit the example to give us an idea of what this Babylon will be, so that when it does show itself, we'll kind of know when we get there. And just like Antichrist, we see that happening. All right? So I'm going to show you this, though, because it's really important to know in reference to Babylon. Very important. A lot of people would think that Babylon and the end times beast empire, which is to say the Antichrist empire, are one of the same institutions. I think the Bible shows us that it's actually not the case. Okay? This is Revelation chapter 17. Then he said to me, the waters you saw, or maybe it's 18, sorry. The waters that you saw, where the whore, Babylon is what he's referencing, is sitting, are peoples, crowds, nations, and languages. As for the 10 horns that you saw, and the beast that she was riding on, they will hate the whore. So those things that represent the beast, it says they will hate the whore. They will hate Babylon. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked, eat her flesh, and consume her with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to do what will fulfill his purpose. That is, God's going to use the beast to fulfill his purpose. Again, God's in control, ultimately, right? The Father. For God put it in their hearts to do what will fulfill his purpose. That is, to be of one mind and give their kingdom to the beast until God's words have accomplished their intent. And the woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. That beast will hate her. That beast is the one that destroys her. We see as you get to this point in Revelation where it talks about the judgment that comes upon Babylon. The beast turns on her. The beast that she rides turns on her. That to me is a very important clue as to then what this is. We have to separate these two out and understand that Babylon, the great, while it will work heavily in tandem with the Antichrist kingdom, is not itself the Antichrist kingdom. It's a world system that's being utilized for that, but will ultimately be destroyed by the Antichrist kingdom itself on its way, presumably, to deal with Israel. All right. Those are the areas that the Bible gives us, the room it gives us. Anything after that, by definition, will be some level of opinion. Okay, so I wanted to kind of give you that base. There's more we could even go over, but at least we have that base, and that's, at a minimum, the areas where the Bible kind of, the playground it allows us to play in, if you will. Me. All right, so from here on out, you're hearing me, okay? This is my opinions, my conjecture from my study, and so on and so forth. Obviously, there will be a temple, a tabernacle in place before the end. I say temple or tabernacle, one or the other. A lot of people expect a third temple, brick and mortar. Probably will be. But here's the thing. They can set up a tabernacle overnight and it will still fulfill the purpose. So, and here's the other thing to know about that. That literally can happen overnight. They have what they need to do the tabernacle. It's sitting over there. They have it ready. The Temple Institute and all this stuff, they have it ready. They've done the practices. If at any point the government were to finally allow them to do that, literally you would go to bed, you would wake up the next day and find out on the news that they started it. It can happen that quick. No, maybe it'll end up being a brick and mortar temple, in which case we'll kind of see them building it and have time. But even then, they can just do the tabernacle and build around it. So my point being is that can happen fairly quick. Things can change really quick. We don't know how far off that's going to be. We also don't know how long the temple needs to be in place. That might actually get started during the 7 years. That might be what leads to the 7 years. We don't know. The Bible does not tell us. Anything there is going to be conjecture, pure and simple. I do generally believe it's probably going to happen before the 7 years, but I can't tell you 100% that that's the case, biblically speaking. All right? All right. Assuming no massive religious or geopolitical changes, I am one of those people that do believe that the final beast empire is essentially an Islamic-based empire. I do hold to that. Here, I'll show on the map thing again real quick. Why do I hold to that? Assuming, this is the assumption on my end, that we only have a few decades left, all right? For the sake of argument, let's say it's another 1,000 years. A lot can happen and change. Islam can come and go. But regardless of that, like I said, where is the focus? It's in the Middle East and involves these places around Israel becoming enemies of Israel and coming against them. So whether it's Islam or whatever can get developed in that time, it's going to be here. Since I do believe we only have a few decades left, well, guess who's there? Muslims. I don't think that's a coincidence. And further, for me, that fourth beast of Daniel, that end time beast, I do believe is a Muslim-based empire, Islamic-based. Why? A lot of people think it's Rome, and they're expecting some type of new Rome to come up again. Rome, all right, when we had that first beast, it was Babylon. That had this whole area right here, essentially. The second beast was the Mede-Persian Empire. That came from here. That had all of this up to the edge of Greece and all the way into India. All right, up to the edges of India, actually, I should say. That was all the Persian Empire. All right, not only did the Persian Empire get Babylon, they got the Holy Land. Okay, the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great, would come from here. He would have Greece, work his way through all of this into Egypt, into Turkey, into all these areas. He'd get all of the Persian Empire. He literally had Babylon, the Persian Empire that came before him, the Holy Land, all the way to the edge. Rome got this far. For about a year or two, they contested the lands around and up near Babylon for a year or two. A lot of times, if you look at maps of the Roman Empire as it extends, it'll show you that. Some of them will have the asterisk to tell you that that was really only for about a year or two. And it was contested. They never fully got it. Regardless of that, they never got Persia. They never went this far. Rome never went that far. I believe that is key, because if we're looking for a beast empire, this fourth beast empire that is itself almost a rebirth of everything that came before, the empire that would get Israel, the empire that would get Babylon, that would get Persia, and would get Greece, was the Ottoman Muslim Empire. Lasted until 1918 at the end of World War I. Okay? That's when it was dismantled. But at its greatest, the Muslim Islamic, under specifically Ottoman rule, had all of that area, all through northern Africa, into Spain. They had gone into Italy and Greece and all that stuff. There's a reason why everything that's happening in Europe is happening right now. in the Muslim belief, once they have land that is owned and conquered by the Muslim, and especially under the caliphate at that time, back then, it's Muslim land and is actually becoming, it's required of them to always get that back if they ever lose it. Again, today we're seeing mass immigration of a lot of Muslims, some who claim to be secular, many who aren't, going into Europe, and we've been seeing what's happening over there. They've realized that the only way they can really do that isn't going to be by war, it's just by moving there and repopulating. So that's kind of what's been happening in Europe, and that is very much on purpose, and is having a massive influence on a lot of places throughout the world, because whether people really realize it or not, the Muslim influence on our media, on our so much of our stuff, there's a reason why things are becoming more and more anti-Israel, anti-Jewish. It's not a Jewish conspiracy, and it sounds like I'm saying it's a Muslim conspiracy. And fair enough. I am kind of saying that. But October 7th happened. Do you guys know, if you followed any of the stuff, when October 7th happened, it wasn't even barely 36 hours later that you had these posts on Twitter and the people going out saying, Israel's committing genocide. Israel's trying to kill the Palestinians. You can go look for the quotes. Within the first 24 to 36 hours after October 7th, Israel hadn't even fully sent anything in yet. There was some fighting. They were starting to do some shooting and whatnot, but that ain't even invaded yet. They wouldn't do that for a couple weeks. And yet, within those first couple days, let alone the week, protest everywhere. Israel's committing genocide. They just had 1,200 people taken, killed, girls whose hips were broken because of the brutal rape that they went through. And people are out there saying, Israel's committing genocide. Really quick. Really quick. Very heavily organized, too. Extremely organized. Yeah, it does sound like I'm saying there's a conspiracy, but come on. That was really quick turnaround to have all that up and running and all these organized protests up and running within hours in some cases. No. That is the influence that is happening. And, you got these people that are trying to, and listen, are there bad people who are Jewish people or bad Israelites, whatever? Duh, yeah, of course, just like anything else. But you got some people that want to get so many people in America focused on, the Tucker Owens or the Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson or the Candace Owens, focused heavily on the Jews and what they're doing. And sure, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the Jews are perfect. I'm not saying that you don't have some of them lobbying for their own personal interests, like anyone does, honestly. But all of that is happening. Meanwhile, you know where the richest of the rich live? They have whole cities with buildings higher than they've ever been made before. They're not in Israel. They're in Saudi Arabia. They're in Qatar. They're in those places, Dubai, et cetera, et cetera. The wealthiest of the wealthiest of the wealthiest of the world congregate in those places. The ones who actually have influence on the world congregate in those places. They got everybody so focused on looking where the money is running within the Jews that they forgot to check where the money's coming from the Muslims. I'm not saying, again, that all the Jews are perfect and they don't have their own corruption, but I'm just saying, look at the influence. Look at what's been happening from October 7th to now. It's the world coming up against Israel. The seeds of that have very much been planted. In any case, that's where I see that coming. And to that end, me personally, I believe that, it's probably something like Turkey, modern day Turkey, and the things that are happening over there as they gain massive influence in Syria after the Syrian civil war. They've got bases they've been building just this last week because of everything that's been happening with us in Iran. And the reality is we're losing influence over there. People don't trust us to be able to take care and defend as well. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and what's Pakistan? Pakistan signed a defense agreement. They're trying to get other ones to sign a defense agreement. And literally the agreement is someone attacks you, it's attacking all of us, right? And so that's how they're working. They're slowly doing that, in large part because of Iran, but understand how the things play out. If you ever were to look at biblical prophecy about the stuff that happened during the time of Daniel, during the time of all that, read into the geopolitics. Read what was happening between the countries at that time. Things aren't just supernatural. There are practical reasons that lead to these things and then develop into other stuff. That's how it's always happened throughout world history. Same thing with Rome taking over Israel and so on and so forth. All this stuff, history plays practically. And if we know scripture, we know prophecy, we can see how these things start to fit in. This idea that in Ezekiel it talks about the Assyrian, all right, which again, the Assyrian Empire, that is a big type of Antichrist empire. That was all here. It was all here, all right? The idea of Nimrod from the original Babylon, and then let alone Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, all here, all here. I truly think in Turkey, with its position, is positioned in a great spot for up-and-coming economic privileges and whatnot. While everything that's happening right now is happening, there's a whole trade war going on. There's a whole Cold War going on in the Middle East. Half these countries trust each other, half of them don't, but that's, it's a whole other thing. Because, we have the trade issue that's happening here, right? You guys know about that. China has been wanting to reinvent, if you will, the Silk Trade Road to kind of solidify its economic grasp on Europe. China is the manufacturer of the world for a lot of places. A lot of things come from there, or come from those portions of Asia in general. They want to solidify that grasp. There is something called IMEC. It's the Indian, Middle East, European corridor. It's something that England, and they got us along with it decades ago, have been wanting to try to solidify, and that's to make India, who's more Western sympathetic, the manufacturer of the world. I mean, they got 1 billion people over there. They can do what China's doing in that sense, make things cheaply and all that jazz. Bring a trade route from them that comes through a couple different ways. It could come through here, which right now that doesn't seem like it's going to work. Potentially come down through the Red Sea up here. Either way, it's a trade route that involves going from India through the Middle East, in some cases Israel, up into Europe, bypassing China. China does not like this. This is the big geopolitical thing that's happening behind the scenes. You got people who side with one another and then betray one another because they all have their own interests, all right? China would love this, what's happening right now between us and Iran, to continue. Why? It kind of takes this potential off the board. But you know who else is also wanting to get in? And they have it either way. Either China's trade through here, or if they do through the Middle East. Turkey is kind of saying, hey, with everything happening with Israel and all this stuff, we can be the trade. They're in the process of building through Syria, and then through that portion of Jordan into Saudi Arabia, a new massive trade networking rail system. Because that's a lot of money. This trade route is a lot of money for whoever the trade goes through. Like most things in world history, trade routes bring a lot of money, a lot of geopolitical, politics, war, everything. A lot of things could be fought just for that, regardless of everything else. What I see is the beginnings, one way or another, for Turkey is to continue to get itself in a position over time to become what will eventually become that Middle East empire. Whether they restart a caliphate again, and here's the thing, that involves Islam, one of the soon to be the #1 religion in the world, Islam. If, whether it's Turkey or somewhere else, so wherever it is in the Middle East, as soon as there's a caliphate again like there once was, Muslims buy their own religious doctrine and code. That's where their loyalty goes. Doesn't matter what country they're in. Their loyalty would be first to that because they believe in that theocracy. That's what it would be. So think about the fact that you have, even if it's 10, 15% of any one of these nations, in a lot of cases it's becoming more, where you have that percentage of people who their loyalty isn't to France, isn't to Spain, Germany, wherever they're at, England. Their loyalty is going to be to that caliphate. What happens in a nation when even just 10% of your people all of a sudden kind of turn against you? Oh yeah. And even without the caliphate, what's happening in those places? In England, in France, you got places where they're bringing Sharia law. Heck, over here, what's the town again? Over in the north, Midwest, Dearborn. That's here in the United States. What was kind of happening in Texas, they seem to be dealing with that a little better. But my God, this is what's happening throughout the world, and everybody's distracted by what Israel and the Jews are doing. Open your eyes, wake up. In any case, again, these are my opinions, but that's what I see developing. Mainly because those are the geographic areas that the Bible itself says are where the final enemy are going to come from. So that's why I see how that kind of developing today. There's more I could say into that, but again, it would just be more and more of my view and conjecture on that end.